The day Cassandra Whitmore said those words, the entire architecture of Elliot Brennan's life shifted, not with a crash, but with a silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Elliot Brennan had done everything right. Not perfectly, but right. Elliot Brennan had shown up, consistently, for 26 months. Elliot Brennan had driven 4 hours in January sleet to be at Cassandra Whitmore's mother's hospital bedside. Elliot Brennan had skipped a promotion interview to sit beside Cassandra Whitmore at a funeral for a woman Elliot had met exactly twice. Elliot Brennan had learned to love Cassandra Whitmore's chaos, Cassandra Whitmore's moods, Cassandra Whitmore's habit of rewriting history when it suited Cassandra Whitmore's narrative. And on a Tuesday evening in a kitchen in Scottsdale, Arizona, with pasta boiling on the stove and a candle burning low on the counter, Cassandra Whitmore looked across the marble island and said the 7 words that ended everything. I want to see other people. Elliot Brennan did not cry. Elliot Brennan did not raise a voice. Elliot Brennan did not demand an explanation, a timeline, a name. Elliot Brennan set down the wooden spoon, looked directly at Cassandra Whitmore, and said 2 words with a steadiness that came from somewhere deep and unshakable. I understand. Cassandra Whitmore had expected anger. Cassandra Whitmore had rehearsed responses to anger. Cassandra Whitmore had not rehearsed a response to calm. The silence that followed was not comfortable. It was not forgiving. It was the silence of a door closing, not slamming, just closing with a quiet, final click. Elliot Brennan had grown up in Scottsdale in a household that valued composure above almost everything else. Elliot Brennan's father, Douglas Brennan, a corporate attorney with 3 decades of courtroom experience, had once told a young Elliot something that lodged itself permanently in the architecture of Elliot Brennan's character. Douglas Brennan had said, "The person who stays calm in the fire is always the one who survives it." Elliot Brennan had carried that sentence like a compass. It had helped Elliot Brennan navigate difficult clients at the architectural firm where Elliot Brennan worked as a senior designer. It had helped Elliot Brennan survive the professional humiliation of losing a major contract to a rival firm in 2021. And on a Tuesday evening in a kitchen in Scottsdale, it helped Elliot Brennan survive the quiet implosion of a 2-year relationship without flinching. What Cassandra Whitmore did not know, could not know, because Cassandra Whitmore had spent much of the relationship focused on Cassandra Whitmore's own emotional landscape, was that Elliot Brennan had already felt the relationship ending. Not dramatically, not with a single argument or a discovered secret, but in the accumulation of small moments. The way Cassandra Whitmore checked a phone during dinner with a private smile. The way Cassandra Whitmore began framing weekend plans in terms of I instead of we. The way Cassandra Whitmore laughed differently when a particular name came up in conversation. Elliot Brennan had noticed all of it. Elliot Brennan had filed all of it. And on that Tuesday evening, when the words finally arrived, Elliot Brennan was already, in some essential interior way, standing on the other side of the door. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that Scottsdale rarely was in April. Elliot Brennan moved through the transition with the same architectural precision Elliot Brennan applied to every project. Elliot Brennan found a new apartment on the north side of the city, a clean, spare space with high ceilings and a view of Camelback Mountain that Elliot Brennan had always privately wanted but never pursued because Cassandra Whitmore had preferred the Arcadia neighborhood. Elliot Brennan unpacked in a single weekend. Elliot Brennan updated personal details, redirected mail, transferred shared subscriptions. Elliot Brennan did not post about the breakup on social media. Elliot Brennan did not text mutual friends to explain or seek sympathy. Elliot Brennan simply began constructing the next version of a life, quietly, steadily, without drama. Cassandra Whitmore, meanwhile, had expected grief. Cassandra Whitmore had expected pursuit. In prior relationships, Cassandra Whitmore had learned that announcing a desire for space usually produced the opposite: calls, texts, pleas, the theater of being wanted. It had become, without Cassandra Whitmore fully acknowledging it, a mechanism, a way of testing the temperature of someone's feeling, a way of confirming value. But Elliot Brennan had not called. Elliot Brennan had not texted. Elliot Brennan had said, "I understand," and then, with a thoroughness that unsettled Cassandra Whitmore in ways Cassandra Whitmore was not prepared for, had simply gone. Meredith Callaway had been Cassandra Whitmore's best friend since their freshman year at Arizona State. Meredith Callaway was sharp, observant, quietly ambitious, and, unlike Cassandra Whitmore, had the rare quality of saying exactly what Meredith Callaway meant and meaning exactly what Meredith Callaway said. Meredith Callaway worked as a financial analyst at a firm in downtown Phoenix, lived in a well-appointed apartment in Tempe, and had spent considerable portions of the last 2 years listening to Cassandra Whitmore describe the relationship with Elliot Brennan in terms that Meredith Callaway privately found troubling. Not because Elliot Brennan was a bad partner. Quite the opposite. Because the way Cassandra Whitmore spoke about Elliot Brennan, with a particular brand of casual dismissal that dressed itself as affection, told Meredith Callaway something that Cassandra Whitmore had not yet admitted to Cassandra Whitmore's self. That Cassandra Whitmore did not understand what Cassandra Whitmore had. Meredith Callaway had met Elliot Brennan at a dinner party in January of the previous year. The group had been 8 people, couples and adjacent friends, at a long table in a Scottsdale restaurant with good lighting and an excellent wine list. Meredith Callaway had been seated across from Elliot Brennan, and what had struck Meredith Callaway was not Elliot Brennan's appearance or profession, but the quality of Elliot Brennan's attention. When Meredith Callaway spoke, Elliot Brennan listened, not with the performative nodding that passed for listening in most social settings, but with actual, focused, unguarded attention. Meredith Callaway had noticed it, acknowledged it internally, and then filed it in the category of things that were not available. Because Elliot Brennan was Cassandra Whitmore's, and Meredith Callaway had rules, but Cassandra Whitmore had changed that. It was 6 weeks after the breakup. Meredith Callaway was at a weekend market in Old Town Scottsdale, moving slowly through stalls of local produce and artisan goods, when Meredith Callaway saw Elliot Brennan standing at a coffee cart with a book tucked under one arm and a look of complete, unperformed contentment on Elliot Brennan's face. Meredith Callaway almost kept walking. Almost. But Elliot Brennan looked up, and the look of recognition that crossed Elliot Brennan's face was warm and uncomplicated. Meredith Callaway, Elliot Brennan said, not as a question, not with any subtext or weight, just as a greeting. Elliot Brennan, Meredith Callaway replied in the same register. They had coffee at a small table near the market's edge. 40 minutes passed like 10. Meredith Callaway was careful. Meredith Callaway did not ask about Cassandra Whitmore. Meredith Callaway did not offer analysis or sympathy. And Elliot Brennan did not perform sadness or bitterness. They talked about architecture. Elliot Brennan had been reading about the Pritzker Prize shortlist. They talked about a hiking trail Meredith Callaway had recently discovered near the McDowell Sonoran Preserve. They talked the way 2 people talk when they are genuinely interested in each other and are, at that particular moment in their lives, free to be. Before they parted, Elliot Brennan said, "I'd like to do this again." Meredith Callaway considered it for exactly 1 beat. "So would I," Meredith Callaway said. Here's where I want to pause for a moment, because what happens next is the kind of thing that divides people right down the middle. Elliot Brennan is 6 weeks out of a relationship. Meredith Callaway is that ex-partner's best friend. The feelings on both sides appear to be genuine. The circumstances are complicated. Think about it, and drop a comment below. Do you think Elliot Brennan was wrong to pursue this? Or do you think Cassandra Whitmore's choices made this inevitable? I genuinely want to know where you land on this. The first dinner was in May. A small Italian place in central Scottsdale that neither of them had been to before. A neutral location, chosen quietly and without announcement. They were not hiding, but they were not publicizing. There is a difference, and both Elliot Brennan and Meredith Callaway understood it. Over dinner, Meredith Callaway asked a question that most people would have avoided. Are you doing this because of Cassandra Whitmore, or in spite of Cassandra Whitmore? Elliot Brennan set down a glass and held the question for a moment with visible seriousness. Then Elliot Brennan said, "Neither. I'm doing this because of you." Meredith Callaway studied Elliot Brennan's face for a long moment. Meredith Calloway had spent years developing the professional skill of reading people. What was performed, what was real. What Meredith Calloway saw in Elliot Brennan's face was real. They began seeing each other, carefully, honestly, without manufactured urgency. 2 dinners in May. A Saturday hike in early June that lasted 4 hours and ended with sunburned shoulders and a shared meal on Meredith Calloway's apartment balcony. A drive to Sedona on a weekend when the light on the Red Rocks was extraordinary and neither of them felt the need to fill the silence with noise. Elliot Brennan and Meredith Calloway were not performing a relationship. They were building something slowly, with intention, the way Elliot Brennan built everything. The way Meredith Calloway had always wanted things to be built. Cassandra Whitmore found out on a Wednesday. Not through Elliot Brennan. Not through Meredith Calloway. Through a mutual friend named Petra Langford, who had seen Elliot Brennan and Meredith Calloway at the Sedona Farmers Market and mentioned it in a group chat without understanding the weight of what Petra Langford was setting in motion. Cassandra Whitmore read the message 3 times. The first time with confusion. The second time with disbelief. The third time was something that arrived fast and hot and unwelcome. A feeling Cassandra Whitmore had not expected and did not know what to do with. Cassandra Whitmore called Meredith Calloway. Meredith Calloway answered on the 3rd ring. The conversation was short. Cassandra Whitmore's voice was not steady. Cassandra Whitmore said, "Is it true?" Meredith Calloway said, "Yes." Cassandra Whitmore said, "How long?" Meredith Calloway said, "About a month." The silence that followed was long and filled with things neither of them said. Then Cassandra Whitmore said, "I can't believe you would do this." And Meredith Calloway, with the quiet directness that had always defined Meredith Calloway, said, "You ended it, Cassandra. You made a choice. Elliot Brennan is not your property because of a relationship you chose to leave." Cassandra Whitmore hung up. Cassandra Whitmore called Elliot Brennan that same evening. Elliot Brennan answered. Cassandra Whitmore's voice had shifted. The heat from the call with Meredith Calloway had cooled into something that tried to sound measured, but was visibly fragile beneath the surface. Cassandra Whitmore said, "I think we need to talk." Elliot Brennan said, "Okay." They met at a coffee shop. Not the kitchen, not any shared space, on neutral ground, where the conversation could not metastasize into something larger than it needed to be. Cassandra Whitmore arrived first. When Elliot Brennan walked in, Cassandra Whitmore's eyes moved over Elliot Brennan with a new quality of attention. The particular involuntary attention that arrives when something previously taken for granted suddenly becomes unavailable. Elliot Brennan sat down. "Ordered coffee." "Waited," Cassandra Whitmore said. "When I said I wanted to see other people, I didn't mean I wasn't trying to end everything. I thought we could take a step back. Reassess. I didn't think you would just..." "Just what?" Elliot Brennan asked. The question was not hostile. It was direct. "I didn't think you would just disappear," Cassandra Whitmore said. "And I didn't think you would just leave," Elliot Brennan said, with a calm that had steel running through it. "Those are the same thing, Cassandra." Cassandra Whitmore looked down at the table. "And Meredith Calloway," Cassandra Whitmore said. Is that about hurting me?" Elliot Brennan was quiet for a moment, not hesitating, choosing words with care. "It has nothing to do with hurting you," Elliot Brennan said. "Meredith Calloway is someone I genuinely care about. That started after you made your decision. It was not designed to wound you, but I understand that it does." Cassandra Whitmore's voice cracked slightly at the edges. "I think I made a mistake," Cassandra Whitmore said. Elliot Brennan looked at Cassandra Whitmore, not with coldness, not with satisfaction, but with a kind of sorrow that was honest and fully realized. "I think we both made mistakes across 2 years," Elliot Brennan said. "But you made a decision, and I respected it. I'm asking you to respect mine. There's a particular kind of grief that has no publicly sanctioned form. It is the grief of losing something you chose to release. The grief of watching someone you underestimated discover what they were worth in the arms of someone you trusted." Cassandra Whitmore sat with this grief in the weeks that followed, and it was thorough and instructive. Not because Elliot Brennan was gone, but because the version of the story Cassandra Whitmore had told, the story in which Cassandra Whitmore was the one with options, the one with agency, the one who would always be wanted, had revised itself without asking permission. Cassandra Whitmore did not pursue further contact with Elliot Brennan. Cassandra Whitmore was not, beneath the pain, an unreasonable person. Cassandra Whitmore knew, in the private, honest part of every person that exists beneath self-protection, that the situation was of Cassandra Whitmore's own construction. The friendship with Meredith Calloway fractured. Not dramatically. No screaming confrontation. No public rupture. It simply went quiet and stayed that way. There were no more Sunday calls. No more shared playlists or forwarded articles. The friendship had been real, and the loss of it was real, and Cassandra Whitmore mourned it differently than Cassandra Whitmore mourned the relationship, with a slower, more complicated grief that had guilt threaded through it. Elliot Brennan and Meredith Calloway continued, with the same quiet intentionality that had characterized everything between them from the beginning. In late summer, Elliot Brennan's firm won a major commission for a mixed-use development in Central Phoenix, a project Elliot Brennan had been pursuing for almost a year. Meredith Calloway brought champagne to the new apartment, and they sat on the floor with takeout containers and good glasses and talked until the city outside went dark. It was not a grand romantic gesture. It was better than that. It was two people who had chosen each other with full awareness, sitting comfortably inside a life they were building together, piece by piece. Elliot Brennan had not set out to fall for Meredith Calloway as an act of revenge. Elliot Brennan had not engineered a situation to wound Cassandra Whitmore. What Elliot Brennan had done, perhaps the most quietly revolutionary act available to a person who has been taken for granted, was simply to remain open, to allow what was genuine to move toward what was also genuine, to trust that self-respect, exercised without bitterness, was its own form of integrity. And Meredith Calloway had made a choice too, one that cost something real. A decade-long friendship, the comfort of an uncomplicated social world, the ease of being loyal to someone by never acting on a feeling. Meredith Calloway had weighed all of it, and Meredith Calloway had decided that a life lived in full was worth the cost of a life lived in management. By September, Scottsdale had cooled slightly, the way it always did when the desert conceded briefly to autumn. Elliot Brennan and Meredith Calloway hiked the same trail in the McDowell Preserve where they had gone in June, but this time there was a different quality to the silence between them. Not the careful silence of two people navigating unfamiliar territory. The easy silence of two people who had become, without ceremony, a home to each other at the top of the ridge, with a valley spread below them in the flat gold of late afternoon. Meredith Calloway said something quiet and true. "I'm glad you stayed calm in that kitchen." Elliot Brennan looked at Meredith Calloway. "My father's advice," Elliot Brennan said, "saved me more than once." They stood there for a while without speaking. The valley was enormous below them. The light was extraordinary, and neither Elliot Brennan nor Meredith Calloway felt the need to name what they were standing inside. It was already evident. It already had a shape, and that was enough.